Welcome back to another episode of Opalwave MTG, a channel dedicated to exploring power levels in EDH. I'm your host Jacob, and this is going to be the second episode of our deck tech series for Evelyn the Covetous. If you want to check out the skirmish version of Evelyn, I'll have that up here. And be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the glory version. I had a special guest come in and join me for that deck tech. As usual, be sure to check out my Fiverr and the Discord if you want to help support my channel. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Future Jacob here. So I did get a new logo and banner for my YouTube channel, and those were both made by a subscriber by the name of Smee. So thank you so much for the logo and the banner. They look really good, and it just feels awesome to have people like what you're doing and contribute to the community. So thank you so much. Evelyn the Covetous is a 5-mana Grixis vampire rogue with two generic hybrid blue-black, black, and hybrid black-red. It's got flash. When Evelyn the Covetous or another vampire enters a battlefield under your control, exile the top card of each player's library with a collection counter on it. Once each turn, you may play a card from exile with a collection counter on it if it was exiled by an ability you controlled, and you may spend mana as though it were any color to cast it. And in the skirmish version, I did a pretty straightforward vampire tribal type of build, running vampires just because they were vampires. In the battle version, I wanted to change it up a little bit. We've still got a lot of great vampires in the deck, but I wanted to add a sub-theme of casting things from exile and casting our opponent's stuff. So we're going to get a lot of value by casting spells from exile in this deck. To start off with our planeswalkers, we have added a Tasha, the Witch Queen, which says whenever you cast a spell you don't own, create a 3/3 black demon creature token. So when we're exiling our opponent's cards with Evelyn, and then we cast those cards with Evelyn, we'll be making 3/3 black demon creature tokens. They don't really, trigger Evelyn or anything, but they're just extra blockers and or things we can swing at people with. So some fun synergy there. Moving on to our vampires, we've got Bloodline Keeper that can keep spitting out vampires over and over and over again, triggering our Evelyn, getting more cards from our opponent's library. We've got some really nice stuff like the Callous Blood Mage, which can let us draw extra cards if we really need to. Scion of Opulence will let us make treasures when our vampires die. And in addition to that, we can sacrifice 2 artifacts to exile the top card of your library, and then you can play that card this turn. So we've got a little bit of extra ways for us to cast things from exile. And then we've got this Prosper that says whenever you play a card from exile, create a treasure token. It's going to provide a lot of great synergy since we'll be exiling our opponent's stuff, we'll be casting our opponent's stuff. It's going to be really nice value. And in addition to that, we've also added this Keeper of Secrets, which says whenever you cast a spell from anywhere other than your hand, Keeper of Secrets deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. So just extra value that we're going to get when we're casting our opponent's spells or we're casting our own spells from exile. In addition to that, we've kind of reduced the overall CMC of our vampires. We've added like the Changeling Outcast, we've added a Viscera Seer, which can have some really nice synergies with the Scion of Opulence, especially if we've got like a Bloodline Necromancer that can reanimate our stuff, and then we're like flickering that with like Thassa. We've also got this Displacer Kitten, which is going to let us flicker a non-land permanent whenever we cast a non-creature spell. It's going to be great for either flickering Evelyn, or we can flicker some of our other creatures, stuff like the Bloodline Necromancer, maybe a Dusk Legion Zealot if we want to get a little bit of extra draw power. And then we've also got the Dualcaster Mage and a Naru Meha. Both are going to allow us to combo in the deck, and they also just really synergize with the flicker spells that we've added for extra synergy. Moving on to the sorceries, we've got the Blasphemous Act, in addition to Demonic Tutor for a little bit of extra tutor power, New Blood so we can steal our opponent's stuff, get that theme going of playing our opponent's stuff, stealing our opponent's stuff. And then we've added the Scheming Symmetry, which is going to be a lot of fun because, well, maybe not for our opponents, but it's going to be fun for us. So choose a target player and yourself or you can choose 2 target players if you really want to. You don't have to choose yourself. Each of them searches their library for a card, shuffles the library, and puts that card on top of it. So you can cast Scheming Symmetry, they'll search for a card, and then you can cast the Vampire or cast your Evelyn, and from there you'll be able to exile the card they just tutored to the top of their library. So it's a little it's a little rude, but you know, that's what they get for tutoring a card at the top of their library. In the instance, we've made some really nice upgrades to our removal, stuff like an Offer You Can't Refuse. We've got some of the 3-drop stuff still, the really powerful removal spells. Added stuff like Cyclonic Rift, can be really great for wiping the board if we really need to. You find some prisoners, allows us to exile cards from the top of our opponent's libraries, as well as Siphon Insight, more ways for us to steal cards from our opponent's libraries, cast more stuff from exile to get more triggers off of our other cards. Got stuff like Reality Shift, where we can exile creatures if we really need to, a lot of Destruction, Terminate, Tragic Slip. And then we've got this Expel from Orazca, which I thought was going to be a lot of fun in this deck, since as long as you have ascended, as long as you have 10 or more permanents, when you cast a spell, you'll put the thing you target on top of that player's library. So if you want a permanent that your opponent has, or you just don't want them to have it anymore, you can put it on top of their library, cast the Vampire, and then exile it, and you can either cast it later or just leave it there forever. So not bad synergy. A lot of the other cards that like put cards on top of your opponent's libraries cost a ton of mana, like 4 or 5 mana, and so I just want to keep it to this one like relatively cheap option with Expel from Orazca. And then we've added a bunch of flicker spells, stuff like Essence Flux. Ghostly Flicker is going to be how we primarily combo in this deck, in addition to Displace. So what we're going to do is we're going to cast our Ghostly Flicker, and we can either target an artifact, creatures, or lands. And with the Ghostly Flicker on the stack, we're either going to cast a Naru Meha, or we're going to cast a Dualcaster Mage, and holding priority on the Ghostly Flicker. When either of these ETB, they're going to copy the Ghostly Flicker. So what's going to happen is the copy of Ghostly Flicker is going to target either of the Dualcaster Mage or the Naru Meha, and then that's going to flicker your Dualcaster Mage. When it enters the battlefield, it's going to target the original Ghostly Flicker again, and then you can do that over and over and over again. And because you get to target 2 things with Ghostly Flicker, you can choose to flicker another Vampire. So if we've got Evelyn on the battlefield, that's going to let us exile everyone's libraries, essentially. Now the fun thing about Evelyn is that she has Flash. So even if we don't have Evelyn out when we're executing this combo, Ghostly Flicker can let us win anyway. So what we'll do is with the once we get this loop going with the Dualcaster Mage, we'll just untap an artifact or a land, and then we'll start tapping that land before the next Ghostly Flicker flickers it, and then we'll make infinite mana. And then when we have infinite mana, we can flash in our Evelyn, and then from there we get to exile everyone's libraries. The Displace and the Illusionist Stratagem kind of work in the same way. Illusionist Stratagem is a little bit harder to do since it makes you draw a card. So every iteration you're going to be drawing the extra card. You might deck yourself out before you can exile everyone else's library, so that one's a little iffy. Illusionist Stratagem is much better as like just a protection or just some extra value. And then we've added a Displace as well, which allows you to hit 2 creatures, so it's still great. But it's not going to allow you to generate infinite mana like the Ghostly Flicker can. Another interesting thing that we can do is if we need to use our Dualcaster Mage early, or our Naru Meha early, in order to like fight a counter war or just copy someone else's really nice value spell. What we can do is we can cast our Ghostly Flicker, and then in response to the Ghostly Flicker, we can cast a different Flicker spell. So we can like cast Essence Flux, targeting our Dualcaster Mage, and then that's going to flicker it, and then it's going to start that loop, because when the Dualcaster Mage enters, we can target our Ghostly Flicker again and do the combo. So a lot of really fun interactions that we can do with flicker spells, and we also added this pretty nice combo that we get access to as well. And the last card I want to point out in the instance is this Delayed Blast Fireball. Since we do Since the odds that we're going to be casting this from exile are pretty high, and we can either exile it with like Prosper, or we can exile it with our Evelyn trigger. It doesn't matter how much you spend to cast this spell. It only cares if you've cast it from exile. So if you cast it from exile, you're going to deal 5 damage to each opponent and each creature they control instead of 2 mana. So it's some really nice synergy with the Delayed Blast Fireball. Moving on to our artifacts, pretty much just straightforward upgrades to our ramp. We've kind of cut back on that 3-drop ramp that we had in the skirmish tier, pretty much exclusively doing the 2-drop ramp. We've added a Wayfarer's Bauble. In addition, I like this card a lot. It has a really nice play pattern, just turn 1 drop it, turn 2 ramp. It's really nice. Then we've added a Glass Cast Heart, which allows us to make vampires every turn and potentially make people lose 13 life and you gain 13 life. We do have a few cards that make us like pay life, so it's nice that we can have a little bit of life gain in the deck. And then we've added a Panharmonicon so we can just exile our opponent's stuff even faster. Moving on to our enchantments, Black Market Connections is going to be super sweet in this deck. You can make a treasure, you can draw a card, but the important thing here is that you can make a 3/3 colorless shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. And Changeling says that that creature is all creature types. So when you do this, you're gonna make a vampire essentially, and then from there you're gonna trigger your Evelyn, exile all the top 4 cards of everyone's libraries. You're gonna generate a ton of value off of this Black Market Connection. So super sweet card in this deck. We've kept the Call of the Bloodline just because of the ability to constantly make a vampire every turn, get those Evelyn triggers rolling. A really great engine in the deck. We've got a Kindred Discovery since we can get a little bit extra value off of our vampires. We can, drawing cards is nice too, in addition to exiling with Evelyn. And in case we don't have the Evelyn, it's going to be a really nice extra card advantage for the deck. Then we've added this Mind's Dilation, which it's just on theme with like stealing our opponent's stuff. And in addition to that, this card makes you cast that spell from exile. So it's going to have additional value by triggering Prosper. And also we get the Keeper of Secrets trigger because we're not casting it from our hand. So a lot of really great synergy with the Mind's Dilation. We've kept the Molten Echoes, so we can choose Vampire. Then from there, we'll start doubling up on our vampire triggers. It's going to be really nice. And then the last card in our enchantment section is going to be this Passionate Archaeologist. I think this card's really sweet. So commander creatures you own have whenever you cast a spell from exile. This creature deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to target opponent. So a really great way for us to continuously ping our opponents down as we are casting spells from exile. It's going to be extra value off of the Mind's Dilation, extra value off of the Prosper trigger from exiling top card of your library. And it's essentially just an additional Keeper of Secrets ability that's stapled on to Evelyn. So really cool synergy with this card, and it's going to help us apply that extra pressure as we are getting the value going. Moving on to our lands, we've added our on-color fetches and our on-color shocks, in addition to some pretty nice lands that can enter the battlefield untapped. Stuff like Storm-Carved Coast can potentially enter the battlefield untapped, depending on how many lands you have in play. Sulphur Falls and the Sunken Hollow as well. So pretty straightforward upgrades, just more lands with the potential to enter untapped. And then one card I wanted to highlight in the sideboard, kind of went back and forth between whether or not I should add this, is the Leyline of Anticipation. And this card essentially lets you cast spells as if they had flash. And the reason why you would want to run that is because Evelyn says once each turn you may play a card from exile with a collection counter on it. So if you wanted to get a little bit extra value casting some of those creatures or sorcery speed type stuff with flash with the Leyline, you could totally throw in a Leyline in this deck and give you a little bit of extra value. I figured this deck has a ton of instants already, and in addition to like some of the other instants that we might be grabbing, the flash might not be like super relevant all the time, but hey, if you want to run in your version, go for it. As far as like a cut for that card, that's a tough one. I would probably cut like Molten Echoes or I don't know, maybe like Florian or something. To maybe Markov Enforcer, There's some decent cuts, a lot of flex options you can do here. So yeah, but that's gonna be the deck tech for today. I hope you enjoyed the battle version of Evelyn, and like I said before, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on the glory version. Got a special guest that's gonna be coming in and doing the glory version with me. Until next time.